When people hear $600 million, it sounds very intimidating. But as we all know, it's a journey, and you didn't start there. So where did you start, and how did that natural progression go for you?
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. And I'm your host, Hannes Henschel.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Path to Wealth. Today, our guest is Veena Jetti. She has $600 million assets under management in the multifamily real estate space. And today we're going to explore what kind of mindset and resilience it took her to get here. Welcome to the show, Veena.
Thank you.
So one of the things I really want to focus on, and I think you have a really interesting journey, is the mindset that it takes to raise that much money. I think when people hear $600 million, it sounds very intimidating. But as we all know, it's a journey, and you didn't start there. So where did you start, and how did that natural progression go for you?
Yeah, so I took the shortcut in a little bit because my mom is a real estate investor. So I already had a really nice foundation laid ahead of me when I was a kid. So I grew up in this world. But then I went to school, I did my degree in finance, graduated, and ultimately I went to work in a lot of corporate real estate companies and really earned a lot of knowledge and experience at some of the best places in the world, best real estate firms in the world. And I left in 2012. I left corporate America to start investing for myself and my husband. And when I did that, I didn't actually have the thought of raising capital. It didn't cross my mind that we could or should do this. So I had set out with the idea of just investing for ourselves, but our friends kept approaching me and they were like, "Can you teach me to do this on the weekend?" I was like, "Well, no, because I work 100 hours a week doing this. And so you work 100 hours a week at a different job. So probably not enough time in the week to teach you on the weekends." But then they started saying like, "Okay, well, can I just write you a check and you invest my money wherever you invest your money?" And I was like, "I don't know, can I do that?" And so I called up one of the securities attorneys I worked with when I was in corporate America, and I asked him kind of what that process looked like. And he was like, "Yeah, you can do it. Here's what a 506B, 506C," kind of went down the whole Reg D exemption list with me, made some recommendations. And that's actually how we started raising capital.
So it looks like it was a natural progression, literally, in the sense that you didn't go out and start in a business sense, but you really just wanted to do this as a kind of family office for your own family. And then people kind of got the idea of what you were doing, but they didn't want to go through the educational journey themselves and trusted you with their money, right?
Right. Yeah, that's very similar to exactly what happened. It was kind of happy accident, if you will.
Yeah. Accidental businesswoman in a way. And so how did you go from managing family money to managing, I guess, like first degree friends and family money to having $600 million assets under management? I mean, there's still a big gap, between first degree people, like, was it just so natural to you to then progress from there? Did it feel like that's something you're really into? Or is it more something that you embraced as a kind of work?
So the capital side, investor relations, interacting with our investors, knowing and understanding who they are and, about their families and their investment goals. That's actually my absolute favorite piece of what we do. Yeah. So it turned out to be that I really loved it and I focus a lot on it. And yeah, it did start out with, friends and family. And I'll say, when you first start out, people say they want to write you a check, but then when you go and ask them to write it, they're like, "Oh,
it's a whole different story, right?" It's like, let me know when that next investment is coming up.
Yeah, I'll catch the next one. And so I remember our first project, I thought we were going to fail. I didn't think we were going to be able to raise the capital because it is hard.
How much did you raise the first time, if you don't mind?
We were trying to raise $1.2 million.
Yeah.
And I cried myself to sleep for like 6 weeks straight, thinking we were not going to raise the capital. And, for me, reputation was very important. And so I was like, I can't start off like this. This is crazy. And now it's a little bit of a different story because now we raise a couple million with a phone call. So, for us, we built it up very slowly. We made sure we built those reputational and relationships with our investors. So I like to know what my investors are doing. All of them have my cell phone number. They call, text me whenever they need anything. And it's really great. We get to communicate. We do check-in calls every now and then whenever they have a question or they just want to catch up or they're looking at something else and they just want some feedback. And then if I'm ever in town, I always try to meet with any of our investors that are local.
Yeah. Given that you're so close to your investors, what is one of the causes that you think you're supporting by supporting an investor? I know many of the people that invest with us, they all have dreams of their own. What is one of your favorite dreams that you're currently supporting by helping your investors grow their funds?
Yeah, so I think about 70% of my investors are physicians or physician families. And I think that the one big thing that I'm passionate about that I really appreciate being able to support is our investors, physicians especially with COVID, they are very susceptible to burnout very quickly. And so I like to think of what we do as a path to help accelerate their path to financial freedom and to allow them to really practice on their own terms versus needing to, earn a dollar or a paycheck. And so I think we accelerate financial freedom for all investors, not just physicians, but the physician burnout is something I think we can combat.
I can much relate to that. My sister is a physician and I have a very close friend who is a physician. And sometimes when I hear their stories, I'm just like, how do you even do that? I
know. It's a lot, especially during COVID, right? I mean, they were in crazy times and they just, they put everything on the line to help save the rest of the world. So I get it. And my husband's a physician as well. So I totally understand.
Yeah. So how did that mindset come up for yourself? I mean, your mom was already in real estate, but how was it nurtured in yourself? Did you always have a tendency towards investing? Did you have that financial savviness? Is that something that was nurtured in you as a kid?
Yeah, so it was definitely a very intentional education process since I was a kid. My parents never shied away from talking about money and talking about investments. They're first generation here, so they came here in 1980 they came here. And they, typical immigrant story, they didn't have any money and they came to give my sister and I an opportunity at a better life. And so my sister and I were born here and they have always instilled the value of a dollar in us. And, it's similar to what we do with our kids. We talk about money, we talk about budgeting, we talk about investing, we talk about finance. And my parents, when I was young, they made me read all these books that I absolutely
could not have been more bored.
So the first one I think they made me read was The Millionaire Next Door, which now there's
an update.
As a kid, I was 13 or 14 when I read that.
Yeah.
And it was so boring and I didn't care. Now as an adult, I really appreciate it. So I've reread it now. And I actually have, there's an update, The Next Millionaire Next Door or The New Millionaire Next Door. I haven't read that yet, but that's on my list. And so, that was one of the books. Then Rich Dad, Poor Dad was another book that my parents had me read, which I find ironic because I am now going to be speaking at a conference with Robert Kiyosaki as the keynote.
Full cycle here.
It is. It's kind of cool to have that come full cycle this year. And so I think that was definitely intentional by my parents. They also, I had 100% match 401k with my parents when I was a kid. So every dollar I saved, they would match it dollar for dollar. They won't do that anymore, but it was a pretty good deal back then.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds very intentional. I think that's the most intentional. I had one of our guests refer to what the parents already instilled. I think there were many who rather gathered on their own, or it was kind of instilled through mentors further down the road. But that sounds already very intentional what your parents did with you, having you go through those dry reads at 14. You're like, what is this all about, this investing thing? I don't want to read that.
Yeah, I did not care. But I'm glad I read it because I've never forgotten the things I've read in those books. So.
Yeah. And it makes such a difference because at that point in time, you still have so much time ahead of you, which is one of the main components in compounding, right?
Yep. Yep.
So once you started taking the money from family and friends, when did you decide to move forward and build this out as a business for yourself? Was it because you liked to handle the investments and the relationships? Was it something that came very natural to you, so you felt like it actually feels more like play instead of work?
Yeah, it does feel natural to me, and it doesn't feel like work. But I mean, really, the second you take in an investor dollar, you will never sleep the same again, right? Because it's a different responsibility to have investor dollars than it is to have your own dollars in a deal. But I will say I had it built as a business prior to taking in investor dollars, just because I wanted to do things the right way. I wanted to make sure that we were, following whatever rules or guidelines we needed to protect our assets and protect ourselves. But also because, I believe that there is a lot to be said about not cutting some of those corners. And so I had a really nice foundation when we started taking in investor dollars. There's certainly things that we could have improved on, knowing now what I know today that, we didn't do back then. But essentially, we always had everything, legally drafted, and we filed with the SEC. And we took all of those extra steps and measures that anybody should take when they are raising capital.
I mean, especially at that scale, like multifamily syndications, after all, are at a certain scale where everything, I think, should be checked off and SEC compliant. It's very, very important.
Yes, it's important. Yes.
Yeah. So how do passive investors vet their syndicators? Like somebody who's listening and is wondering how they can get into deals, how do they make sure they have somebody who's actually operating with that level of compliance and integrity?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I actually think at this point in the market cycle, that's the most important thing that anybody can do, is make sure they're vetting their sponsor, because we are either at the top or just almost at the top of a market, right? And so now more than ever, it's really going to matter who the sponsor is. So I'm an LP investor into other deals too. So I have like a list of questions I like to ask. The first thing I always ask a sponsor is about what can go wrong in the deal, right? Like what might not work out. And what I'm looking for is an answer of, okay, these are all risks to the deal. Here's how we've mitigated those risks. I want to know that they are investing alongside of me, and I want to know that they have ample skin in the game. So we are our own largest LPs into our deals. So our co-sponsors, family and my family combined, are the largest LPs into our deals. And I think it really aligns the investors and the sponsors to have that common interest. I also like to ask them what their role in the deal is, right? Are they a sponsor? Are they raising a fund? And I'm not opposed to any one answer. I just like to know. And you can actually look up your sponsor on edgar.gov and find their SEC filing. So if you want to know if they're compliant and they're actually following SEC rules, you can look it up there, verify it. But one thing is, that website is very delayed. So if you don't see it right away, don't panic. But two, you should also ask the sponsor what name to look up, because typically we'll create a new entity for every deal, and it's not always going to be the same name. So, you can ask a sponsor to do that. Usually they'll be able to provide it to you. But like I said, don't panic if you don't see it. It's a government website, so it takes some time to load.
It's a little bit behind, like it.
Yes, just a little.
So what qualities are you looking in that person that you're like eventually looking into investing alongside, like the kind of values, or what is an important pillar to your investment strategy when you pick the syndicator?
Yeah, so I also always ask what's the worst deal you've ever done? Like what happened in that deal? Because that tells you a lot about how a sponsor handles things that aren't going right. I think that these are all investments. There's risk in every investment. These are not risk-free. These are not guaranteed returns. And I think what you're really looking for as an LP is maybe market conditions are going to affect the investment, and that's the risk you're taking on. But how does the sponsor handle it, right? Do they communicate with you? Are they on top of it? Are they paying attention? Are they doing everything they can? Or have they just kind of walked away from the project and moved on to the next thing? Are they not responsive? Are they unable or unwilling to answer your questions? So those are all things that I think are really important when you're picking a sponsor. And also a sponsor that shares your investment philosophy, right? Like our investments, we do very, very, very few of them because we're really, really conservative on how we look at our deals. If you're looking to double your money in a year, my investments are not going to ever show you that because we're just not that aggressive. We might do it and like hit a home run here and there, but I'm not going to project that to investors. So you want to make sure your personal philosophy is in line with what the philosophy of the investor or the sponsor is.
And as a sponsor, what if I were to be an LP, what am I looking for to kind of understand how you mitigate the risk as a syndicator? Like if I were to be new in your investment database, how do I understand how you mitigate the risk for us as the LPs?
Yeah, so today what we do is we send out when we have a deal, we send out our offering memorandum. Once we send that out, we actually host a conference call and we add more color to the deal. So I'm not going to like read the OM to you, right?
Yeah.
Like you're accredited. If you're investing in my deal, you're accredited. You could read. What I'm actually doing is I'm adding in that intangible color to the deal that I can't necessarily type out. So as an example, our last deal we closed 296 units in a very nice suburb of Atlanta. The purchase price was $81.25 million. And we underwrote and it was 100% classic interior. So I was really excited. This is actually
awesome
my favorite deal we've done. Yes, so much upside available. And we underwrote to a $306 premium on post-renovated units.
Yep.
And investors ask like, okay, well, how do you know you're going to get this? How do you know that this is appropriate? We have an asset down the street from there that's getting upwards of $540 per unit on sometimes on unrenovated rents. So $300 a unit is really an easy threshold for us to meet. And we knew that. We also, that area has a very solid tenant base. The median income is almost six figures there. And we underwrote it with 50 basis, or actually on that one, we underwrote 80 basis points of expansion over 5 years. Do I think cap rates are going to slide 80 basis points in such a stabilized asset? Probably not.
Yeah.
But if they do,
You're ready for it.
No big deal. Interest rate risk, I think, is a big one that we're seeing today. We bought a cap on our interest rate, so we never have to worry about it going above the cap of the interest rate that we bought. So, those are all things that I think, they're risks, but we can mitigate them to some degree. So,
yeah, obviously this is something where investors need to be a little bit sophisticated so they understand those nuances, how, for example, the financing can affect the security in the long term of the performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, a lot of the concepts or the assumptions made on underwriting, they sound technical when we talk about them, right? Because we're talking about them in a financial way. But if you're an investor looking at them, you shouldn't be intimidated. Think through if you were a renter, right? Most of us have been renters at some point in our lives or are currently. If you're a renter and you're making, let's say $100,000 is the median income, can you afford the business plan of what the sponsor's saying? Would you pay $2,000 for no granite, for no washer and dryer? Maybe not. So a lot of it can be like common sense related. So if you put yourself in the tenant's shoes, you can get a better sense of whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah, sometimes also when I tour properties, I'm like, okay, now I've seen 10 properties in a 5-mile radius. Would I pay $1,500 here if I can pay $1,500 here? And it just kind of makes it very tangible if there's an upside or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think to your point, comp shopping is really important. So we do all of our own comp shop verification in-house. So, a lot of sponsors will pull a report and call it a day. We actually walk our competitors. We call them personally to verify the information. And I think that's a level of diligence you want from your sponsor too.
Yeah. So what other levels of diligence do you have that you think set you aside from maybe some other more aggressive sponsors that are just trying to get the deal done?
Yeah. Well, like I said, we do almost no deals. So
Yeah.
our diligence process mostly weeds out every single deal.
Yeah.
In 2021, we did 2 deals the whole year. In 2020, we did 1.
Yeah.
So, we actually turn away most deals out of the gate. Our diligence process is fairly detailed. And by the time we're going into the PSA or LOI stage, we've done the vast majority of our diligence. So we look at, comps. Like I said, we comp shop. We look at comps pretty closely. We have underwritten the deal like 1 billion times by then. We've had our lenders kind of bless the deal and give us an idea of what financing looks like. We've talked to our contractors. Usually we've had them at least go by the property. If they haven't done like a formal walk, they're at least checking it out. And the funny thing too is that when you start getting to scale in your market, a lot of times the contractors that were working for the previous owners, so you can sometimes get more information that way. Like we have an asset in Atlanta that one of my friends was the GC on the previous owners when the previous owner owned it. And then I had no idea until I was telling him, oh yeah, we're buying this asset. He's like, oh, I was a GC on that. And so I was like, great. What issues did you have there? What were the problems?
That's a lot of insight there, firsthand insight.
It is. It's really useful. And then also your property management team, they can give you a lot of insight about the area, what the comps are doing, especially if they're larger. We use our property management company to, bless the underwriting, if you will, in our assumptions. So if they say, hey, we can definitely get a $500 increase here, we might say, okay, wonderful, we're going to hold you to that. And then on our underwriting, we might only underwrite to $300.
Yeah, and I mean, then you have some really conservative expectations because the property management company will probably already give you a lower number than what they actually think they can get.
Yes.
So by the time you get to your underwriting and you're building in another layer of conservative numbers, you're actually pretty conservative already. And I think
and also we like to hold our property managers accountable to what they say. So when we close the asset, we say, hey, you said that this was the number, so why are you not producing it? Or, whatever the case may be. So we hold them to their budgets.
Yeah. I think your investment strategy actually goes alongside with one of the greats, Warren Buffett. He's like, I only take the swings where I know I will win. And he's like, just saying no, and like waiting for that bet. And he says that's the beauty of investing, because you can just sit and wait until you swing.
Yeah.
And
that's totally our philosophy. We'd rather do 1 great deal than do 5 okay deals.
Yeah. So at the same time, do you also plan to give away 99% of your wealth eventually? I know you're very charitable.
Ask me when I'm like 80 years old, maybe.
There's still a long road ahead to get to that number.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I know you're very charitable. And what is like one of your closest projects close to your heart? I mean.
Oh gosh, there are so many. I feel like we do something really fun every time we close a deal. We actually celebrate by inviting everybody who touched the deal, everyone who made money on the deal, like our vendors, etc., our sponsors, obviously, and then our investors too. We choose a charitable organization, and it changes from time to time. It's really based on what is near and dear to something happening in one of our investors' lives or one of our lives. And so we'll choose a charitable organization, and then we'll do like a second round of fundraising, but we'll do charitable giving there. Recently, on our last close, we've actually kind of changed strategies a little bit. And instead of doing investor gifts, because like how many Atlanta themed gift baskets can you send investors, right? Like there's only so much Coca-Cola they want.
Gotta get into a new market.
Exactly. I got to wait for the new market to go back to that. But what we did on this last one was, in lieu of gift baskets, we actually had investors vote on a charitable donation. And we did a charitable donation in their name. And the last deal, water.org, was the winner. So we made a donation there on behalf of all of the investors in that deal. So it's kind of our success, and then giving back, success, giving back. And that's kind of how we have structured that.
Yeah, I mean, that's very much how we like to do it too. And there's always a lot of to give. No, I think there's one of the beautiful things about the multifamily real estate space is that I feel people are very open and giving. There is a very, very much paying it forward mentality.
Yes,
Yeah, it's a very giving
I
space.
agree.
So what are some of the networking events in the year that are your most favorite, maybe based on the kind of people you meet? And because I feel like when I first flew down to Dallas, Texas in 2018 to go to some of those networking events, I was very positively struck by the community of people that were very helpful and very
Yeah,
forward-minded. Like everybody just wanted to help each other, and I think
yeah,
that's rather rare in overall corporate or in the business world. So what are
yeah.
some of your favorite annual events to go to?
So we pre-COVID, we used to go to NMHC every year. That's kind of the big multifamily
Yeah,
conference, but it's a really great time for us to meet with our vendors, our brokers, our lenders. So that's one that we typically go to, and we plan to resume for 2023. And then I speak at a lot of different events, and I enjoy all of them for different reasons, which I know is totally not an answer, but I like being able to network with the other speakers, or sometimes,
yeah,
I'll have a couple of investors attending, and I'll get to spend a lot of really quality time with them. So it really depends on, what the conference, I speak at a lot of different conferences. And I really like to learn from other sponsors that are doing something differently than we are, because it's something that we can maybe do better. And so, in Dallas, there's a bunch of virtual ones too, which is really nice because those allow us to, go to other opposite ends of the country in the
yeah.
same day if there's the same
Like coast to
conference.
coast in 1 hour.
Exactly, exactly. And sometimes I've caught myself where last year I remember I had 3 different speaking engagements the same weekend. Thankfully, one of them was virtual, and then I was able to go from the event in Dallas to, I think it was to Atlanta, was the second stop, or Arizona was the second stop. So it was hectic, but it's nice to be able to do virtual events too.
Is speaking something that you like very enjoy? Is that very natural to you? Or is it something that gives you, is it more exciting or more in the slight anxiety part before you go on stage?
No, I enjoy speaking.
Yeah.
I enjoy connecting with others. I think it was more intimidating when I was less comfortable in what we're doing, but I know my business so well at this point. There's not going to be a real question or comment about like what I do in the multifamily
Yeah.
space that someone else knows better than me, right? So I make it a point to always be learning and studying and understanding how the market is shifting and changing, so that I know my business better than anyone else.
Yeah. I think that's a point that actually brings out the best in speakers. If you can just tell they're talking their essence in a way, they're just talking what they're doing and breathing every single day, and you can
Right.
just kind of fire away at them and they can just speak to it,
Yeah,
rather than having maybe something prepared along those lines. Yeah.
exactly.
So how do you feel as a woman in this space? Because I mean, it's pretty male dominated.
Yes.
There's women, and there's more and more women, and I'm very happy about that. But how do you
Yeah.
feel about that? Do you feel like, I mean, I don't think there's a corporate elbow mentality, but there's certainly probably sometimes you might be the only woman in the room.
I'm oftentimes the only
Yeah.
woman in a room. I'm oftentimes the only minority in a room, and certainly more often than not, the minority woman in the room. So I think that recently there's been a big shift or intentionality that companies are moving toward with regards to seeing more women and minorities in the workplace and in historically male dominated fields. And I'm very excited to see that change. I know I've definitely seen it in my own company. I see an uptick of women investors, which I'm very
Yeah.
excited about. That is a demographic that historically just doesn't invest as often as their male counterparts. And I love having women in our deals. My co-sponsor and I are both women-led companies. So, and our capital markets, she's a woman-led team as well. So we have a lot of the girl power here. But no, it's very exciting. It's not without its challenges. I've had some really crazy comments, and I've had, the most Googled term about me for a while was my husband. So,
what? It's a yeah. That's
it alternates between Veena Jetti husband and Veena Jetti net worth. So I don't know.
That's just interesting. But I think just the other week I saw a video from Priyanka Chopra, how she's making a point that women should be not only financially educated, but financially independent. And do you have any particular focus where you feel like you want to help other women or maybe upcoming girls stepping into that reality? Because I truly think anybody should be financially independent, but I certainly want to see that women also become financially independent, to have that freedom of choice. Because even from a climate change perspective, women that have choices, don't get in dependency with stupid men. Right.
That is very true. I think that it is really important. And I think why there's such a focus, I love Priyanka Chopra. I think she's amazing. And I think why there's such a focus on having girls be more financially educated and financially independent, it's multifold, right? Especially if you step outside of the US, right? Girls are more likely to not get an education. They're more likely to get pregnant younger, and they're more likely to live in poverty as a result of that. And even here, when we look to US statistics, the more educated girls are, and the more we can prevent teen pregnancy, the more a girl has an opportunity to break a life cycle of poverty and a familial cycle of poverty, or to achieve higher financial results, right? And so I think it's really important. I'm the mother of two young daughters. I have twin 2.5-year-olds. And so this is something that's very important to me, that they are financially independent and that they understand how money works and that they're not afraid of it. This is an overwhelming topic, right? I mean, even for us in a financial space, even though we're on the private equity side, if you want to talk to me about like taxes, I'm going to give you a blank stare and say, okay, call Larry, my tax strategist, and let him tell you about this. 'Cause I don't know. I hire him to do this. And so it's overwhelming. And I think it's our job as sponsors, especially when we're trying to focus on getting women to be invested and making good financial decisions. I think it's the responsible thing to do is to try to break down what we're doing to easy to digest steps, not just for women, for anybody that's new in the space. And for me, I love talking to other women that are, they're at the top of their field. They're surgeons and they're entrepreneurs and lawyers and engineers, and nobody's speaking to them.
What do you mean when you say nobody's speaking to them about investments, or how to nurture their investment strategy into the future?
Both, I think, right? So all of these financial education tools and seminars, all of that is typically, our companies like ours are typically run by men. And so the audience they naturally speak to are other men. And I think that's great. But I think that we should be speaking to women too, right? Like, we as women have a different set of responsibilities when we're working, right? I mean, my husband works, I work, and in our house, we're very, very intentional about splitting domestic labor. And I work more hours than he does, so he picks up a lot of slack at home. But for a lot of women, that's just not the reality. They're dropping off and picking up from daycare. They're doing laundry. They're cooking. They're cleaning. And the domestic chores of the house are falling to them. And the mental labor of remembering those chores, right? Like, I have to remember to make a pediatrician appointment. I have to call the landscaper. I have to pay the housekeeper. Like, all of those things are things that women naturally tend to be the ones that carry the bulk of that load. And it's heavy.
Yeah, it's like being a CEO and task manager of a family.
That's exactly right, which is a whole job in addition to the things you're actually doing.
Yeah. So what do you think, from maybe an educational standpoint, how can that be resolved? Because where I grew up, we didn't have a lot of financial savviness put in from an education standpoint, from the system itself. Where do you think in the journey of a young woman, where should that be brought into her life? Is that the parents, or is it maybe the family? Is that the companies she works at, or is the responsibility somewhat with the school? I mean, I think it looks like your parents did really well with you, even though the books were pretty boring.
Yeah, the books were still boring, but listen, I think it should come from everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is if your parents did not have the financial knowledge or know-how or education, you may not have access to somebody that knows how to teach you that. And I think it's important that schools pick up that slack, right? But as parents, my kids are 2.5, and we talk about money now to them. They say, oh, I want more Play-Doh. And I'm like, okay, where are you going to get it? And they're like, oh, we could just buy it. I'm like, great. Do you have any money? And they're like, no, I don't have any money. I'm like, okay, how are we going to get some money? How are you going to earn that? And, so we're like starting that conversation now. They have savings accounts. We talk about going to the bank to make a deposit, things we used to actually do back in the day. Now it's all electronic, but we talk about it and we're open about it. Even, our nanny, she told me a couple of weeks ago, she's like, Veena, ever since working here, she's like, I opened an investment account and I've started investing the money that I'm earning. And I was like, oh, that's great to hear. And she's like, yeah, she's like, I didn't think about it or I didn't know about it until I was around you and I saw you doing this. And she's like, and now I realize how important this is for me and my kids. And that to me is like very impactful because now she's building up her own financial independence and her own financial savviness, even if it's starting one step at a time. So I think, parents have to do it. We should be talking about it in our circles, whoever we're exposed to. I spend a lot of time on Clubhouse because there's a lot of people there that wouldn't otherwise be in my circles, right? And so I get an opportunity to talk to women and young girls. A lot of the moms and dads on the app will have their kids come in and just listen to us speaking, or they'll ask questions. And I think it's a really great opportunity for us to be able to connect with each other and give that access to people who wouldn't otherwise have it.
Yeah, that's something I just discussed with my brother today, that there are different platforms, for example, like Clubhouse or TikTok, where you can tap into a group of people that doesn't have access just based on the platforms they operate on. Like
absolutely.
If Warren Buffett is on LinkedIn or YouTube and they're only on TikTok, it will just not connect.
No, no, I agree. And I like Clubhouse because it's a live interaction. So I can have somebody ask me a question that's very pertinent to them and their business and where they are or what they want to be doing or their questions versus, it's like a live podcast. Yeah. So we're having a discussion, which will be applicable and helpful, but they might have a question about how to specifically do this one thing that we might not cover in our conversation.
Actually, we have the opportunity to put in an audience, so maybe in the future we do a live version of this.
Oh, that would be so fun. Yes. No, I love when you can have live interaction because then you're getting to actually answer questions people have right at the moment.
Yeah, it's true. So would your kids already pass the marshmallow test?
I don't know about that. One of mine might. The other one definitely would fail it.
Yeah. But then, I don't know if that was ever replicated properly. But
yeah, I don't know if it was either, but it's definitely interesting. And it kind of makes sense, right? So, okay, for the people listening that don't know the marshmallow test,
Thank
right?
You, yeah.
They gave kids a marshmallow and they said if you wait a certain amount of time to eat it, you'll get a second marshmallow. And you have the choice to either eat it now or wait and then get 2 marshmallows. And they said that the ones that waited were tied to better financial outcomes in the future. I also think, though, that this is like a different kind of temptation when you're a little kid, right? I mean, to be fair, I don't know that I would resist a marshmallow right now either, but, but I think that, just trying to model that for your kids is probably more important. And I think there's something to be said about the environment you grew up in, right? So the lower income you are, the more and this is what studies say is the more likely you are to spend instead of save, because you don't know when that next dollar is coming. But when you have financial security, it's really easy to save it and say, okay, there's another paycheck coming, and you don't have the same kind of instability. And so I think that that is something that is really important to kind of address or consider when we're making these types of studies and generalizations.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that I found in my friend circle back in Europe is they're big savers. The Germans are big savers, but not investors. And then when I was looking back at how some of my old friends handle their money, I was like just blown away, because they're very diligent in stacking it under the mattress, but they're not diligent in putting it to work. And I found that very interesting. I really had to break some nuts there. And I'm like, do you understand what that means? And then on a long enough time scale, I showed it to them on a graph. I'm like, this is the difference between conservative investment and just saving money.
Doing nothing. Yeah. Especially with inflation right now. I mean, you would be losing so much money if you didn't invest it. I think the difference too is like in America, right? The mentality is not to save it or invest it. It is to spend it and buy liabilities. And that's why I think, some of these books really are a mindset change, because we don't buy, and I mean, most people that do well will say the same thing. They don't buy liabilities. They don't finance liabilities. Yeah. We finance assets, and we use the assets to buy the liabilities.
Yeah. Well, I think the average American buys liabilities on a credit card, which basically compounds you into death.
Yep. That's exactly what I mean. They finance liabilities. Yeah. And, we don't ever spend anything on credit cards that we can't pay off in the same day. We just use it to get the points so we can travel. But, we live below our means. We delay our second marshmallow by waiting.
Yeah. But I guess that's a really crucial part. It just seems so far out at times. And I think also looking at a compounding curve, it doesn't look like it's going anywhere in the early stage.
Yeah. So and that's true.
So I think it's very much a mental game to win. And at the same time, I think being a successful investor, or like yourself, a successful business owner, is a lot more about mindset than the mechanics. What do you think differentiates somebody who is actually has a winning mindset, like a successful mindset, someone who goes and, doesn't think it into inaction, but rather just steps into it and owns it?
I think persistence is like the key differentiator between business owners that end up successful or not, right? I mean, if I couldn't even tell you how many times I thought like, I should just quit. This is too hard. I'm just going to quit. Maybe every day, multiple times a day. It's hard. It's not for the faint of heart. And that's why everybody doesn't own businesses, and everyone shouldn't own businesses. But the people that do and are successful, I think the common trait you'll find between all of them is that they're persistent. They are relentless in their pursuit of what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Are those particularly those moments when you have to deal with the tax part of it?
Yeah, that's definitely one of them. When I have to deal with like the bank making errors, when any tech issue, like pretty much everything, I'm like, I should just stop.
Just stop. But
I'm
then
done.
What keeps you going? Why do you keep going?
Two things. One, first and foremost, I have a responsibility to the investors that put their money in with me, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. If I have their dollars, it is important to me that I honor my responsibility to them. But secondly, I feel like I have this feeling that every time I'm about to like give up on something, like the next time is going to be the time I'm going to really regret not doing it. And so when you have that, it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm just going to do it one more time. Then I'm like, I've done it so many times. I'm just going to try again one more time. And, eventually you'll succeed because you'll figure out who was it? Albert Einstein that was like, I didn't fail. I just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. That's kind of what being an entrepreneur is.
Yeah. And it's kind of just pushing the envelope. And I mean, I guess failure is only if we don't get up the last time. It's like if we stay on the ground, that's the ultimate failure. Everything else is just part of the learning curve, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So where do you want to take this from here? Like, I mean, you've already have a pretty significant fund. What are like your midterm to long-term goals? What kind of impact do you want to generate by what you're doing?
Yeah, I think for me the big thing is that I want my girls to know that they don't have to choose between a family or a career. I want them to see somebody that looks like them in this space. That's actually really important to me. Representation, I think, is really important. And so for me, it's not about the money. It's not about, the number of units, any of that. For me, it's really about the example for my daughters, and the ultimate goal for me is really to buy back all of my time. And so that's what I'm really trying to do here, is buy my time, which is the most important asset I have. The most important purchase I could ever make is my time. It's not the money.
I think the part with the representation is very important because unfortunately, I guess in finance, and the same is true in law and other spaces, where the majority of people probably look a little bit more like me. It's like male white guys, and I think representation is really important. We actually have a couple of other guests coming soon who represent a minority in their particular field, like, for example, law partners. And I'm really looking forward to this conversations, because I think it's essential for others to see that role model and kind of like, wait, if he can do it, I can do it. Like it also takes all of the excuses off the table why someone can't do it. And in a way, I already think we live in the best times ever when it comes to opportunity, because the internet is just such a resource of knowledge. And I guess it just kind of depends how we use it.
I totally agree. And I will say that there have been many men and white men who have championed equality. And I think that those voices like yours are so important, because you open opportunities and create platforms for representation to actually make a difference. Like, it's not something that I can do on my own or you could do on your own, but when we're all working toward this common goal, it's actually really amazing to see it happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's super crucial, because now that the world is so online, I want the kids, even if it's in a village in India or in Africa, I want them to find those role models. I mean, there's some who are tough enough, who blow it out of the water no matter what, who don't need the role models. But I would say that the majority of people feel more comfortable if they can relate to someone who's already done it. Like, I
absolutely agree.
Yeah.
I think actually a classic example of this is very fitting right now. And, this is like not a political statement at all, but when Kamala Harris was sworn in as VP, right? Like, regardless of what your political views are.
Yeah.
I watched it with my daughters, who were maybe like 20 months at the time. They were little. And they were watching her get sworn in. And it was a very iconic moment, not again because of the Democrat, Republican, not because of that, but because I never grew up. This is the first time in my life that I've seen someone that looks like me in the second highest office. And my girls are now going to spend the most formative years of their lives seeing that as a possibility, where we're told that, but we never saw it actually happen. And when my daughter was watching, and she looks at me, she goes, it's mama, it's mama. And she was like saying that, Kamala Harris looks like mama. And I was like, that's right. She looks like us, and she's a woman, and she's Indian too, because she's half Indian. Yeah. I'm like, she's Indian too. And this could be you one day, baby. You could be president one day. And she was like, yeah. She's like, yeah, that's mama. And I was like, okay, well, you'll get there one day. But I think that's very important.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably true that there's an entire generation now that looks up to that. And just has that possibility in mind, and in a different way, one of the things that Elon Musk tried to achieve is not actually putting his companies where they are now, but it's just sparked that inspiration, because when the Apollo missions flew, people were inspired by what they saw. And I think in a
Yes.
similar fashion, we can do that in finance, or we can do it in real estate, in so many different aspects. It's just make sure we have those role models, and as you said, and really make sure people see them and can relate to them. And I think that's one of the really important parts, is that you keep speaking in public, because it will
Yes.
give more and more women that role model. So
Well, I
thank you for
appreciate that.
doing
Yes.
all of those speaking events.
Well, and thank you for providing the platform.
Yeah. So this has been really, really lovely. Thank you for your time. When it comes to charity, what is one of the things that you really want to see in the world? Like Mahatma Gandhi said, you have to
change.
Yeah, right. You have to be the change.
Yeah, so one of the charities I really like to support, and we do often, is kiva.org, and it is a micro lending platform, and it allows you to fund a business in different countries or locally, and it's a loan. It's not you just giving money to somebody.
Yeah.
It's a loan. They pay you back, and they pay you back. They get paid back with interest, right? The loans get paid back with interest. It doesn't go to you. You get your original money back, and you can make a donation to cover the administrative costs, and that's like a whole different thing. But we donate to kiva.org, and we actually select women-owned businesses in other parts of the world. And so that is a passion for me, because it allows somebody to not just get help temporarily. It allows them to build something and to support a family. And we specifically choose women-owned businesses because what we've noticed is when women are empowered in third world countries especially, and when they are the breadwinner and they're earning money, the kids get taken care of. Whereas with male-owned businesses, obviously they take care of their families too, but there's a lot higher incidence
Slightly differently.
It's different, and there's a higher incidence of the money then being used to go gamble or drink or substance addictions. And so the kids may not get taken care of in that case. And so we really focus on supporting women, empowering women, and creating opportunities for them to support their families.
Yeah. What you just said rings very much true. A couple of years ago, I went to Guatemala with my dad, and we were visiting a remote village. And one of the local charity founders told us that it's empowering the women is the crucial piece to the puzzle, because the men literally take the money to the bank. So what she would do, even if the man worked at her foundation or something, for example, in construction, she would give the money to the moms. In order to make sure that it arrives with the kids and is used for what it should be. Because the men, they will like almost, and I don't want to say that all men in Guatemala go to the bar with their money, but there's a higher chance that the money does, the tendency that the money doesn't go where it should go. So I think that really helps to empower women in those spaces, especially further out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you can on Kiva, I think you can do a loan for like $5 or $10. It's a very small barrier to entry. So one thing we do is like whenever we have a birthday or something, we just open a loan there, and we leave the money in there. So we never take the money back out after we've loaned it. We just we keep re-lending it out. Yeah. And, my friends and I, we have like a lending team. So we'll pick, a person, and then we'll fund their whole loan together.
Nice. That's so nice.
So,
and it wasn't intended to be that way, but today is actually World Women's Day. So I'm glad the conversation drifted into that direction.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's just hit the nail. So
awesome.
Veena, thank you so much for sharing your story and being a role model. And I hope that there's a large chunk of the audience that will connect with you, because I think there's really something here that you do for people. And thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course, it was lovely to have you.
Yes, likewise. It was great to be here. We should do this again for sure.
For sure, yeah.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.